wanted last week, I began talking about addiction, and I want to follow up on what I started with the last discussion. And this is a big topic, and really, as I began to think about it, I didn't realize this was going to be such a big topic when I first started, but the more I got into it, thinking about it, I realized it is quite a vast thing. And what I'm going to do today is, I realize what I've done is I basically set an outline for a much, much larger series of classes, perhaps even someday, doing these classes, because so I can only give a very quick overview, and I'd like to finish up what I started last week introducing the subject, but then I wanted to go into very quickly into an overview of some of the solutions. But before we get to the solutions, let me just really quickly, for some of you may not have joined us last time, as to what I was speaking about. And I was saying in our last discussion, I mentioned that there's been studies conducted worldwide in most modern technological societies that seem to indicate there's been a statistically significant rise in psychological problems. Things like common things, depression, anxiety, apathy, inability to concentrate. And this has especially been noticeable in young people. And there have been many theories about why this has taken place. And, typically people say, oh, so it's those smartphones, but it's not such an easy thing as that. And I suggested a possible explanation that in my research and thinking about this, other people have mentioned this as well, but it resonated with me. And by addiction, I mean it more in a broad sense, not just addiction to alcohol or drugs, but that too, obviously. But I mean addiction is to any particular substance or activity or inclination that stimulates. It's stimulating sensory stimulation, pleasures, big and small, by which I mean attachment to any sort of habit that causes a craving when it's not available. That morning cup of coffee or nighttime snack, or I got to have the daily news when I wake up. I got a message, text my friends. I got to read my email. I got to do this, that, or well, you really don't have to, but you're addicted to it because it gives a certain pleasure to do these things. And we have to remember this in the context that Paramhansa Yogananda said that moods, and these are the direct result of overindulgence in the senses. And because we live in an increased technological society, the ease by which we can satisfy our desires for pleasure have increased. And you can easily, just a click of the button, you can order whatever you want, get what you want. And in our rapidly speeded up society, it makes it very easily to satisfy. And what happens is the body and the brain are involved in this. And when a human, or let's take a rat or a guinea pig, if you wish, satisfies a desire, chemicals, dopamine particularly, is released into the bloodstream, and we feel pleasure. It's a pleasure, it's a sensory pleasurable experience. We want to repeat that experience. And of course, we do, and gradually what happens, because there's a chemical reaction taking place, gradually we lose the ability to feel any pleasure at all. We become inured to it. It doesn't respond as easily. And what's happening on a biological level is our bodies stop producing those chemicals, that dopamine, what are the other ones associated with pleasure, and we go into a state which is known as the dopamine deficit state. The symptoms of that, when the body can no longer produce its own pleasure without some outward stimulation, is anxiety, depression, lack of motivation, all of these things, lack of concentration. These are symptoms, and this is the body's way of warning us. Change your habits. Stop what you're doing. You are out of balance. Suffering, in other words, makes us seek a solution to that. And because we're surrounded by easier and easier access to pleasure, we become vulnerable. Just a click of the button away. And I think that this is basically a disease of modern affluence, technological affluence. It feels good. Let's do it again and again and again. But let me clarify. I'm not bashing pleasure Pleasure has its place. It's not the enemy. It has its place. It's addiction, attachment to pleasure of any sort, that becomes a problem, binding ourselves. And we need to understand that pleasure, sensory pleasure and happiness are not the same thing. Although pleasure, Swamiji would often say, Swami Kriyananda would say, it's a counterfeit happiness. That pleasure masquerades as happiness, whereas happiness is an inner state of being, whereas pleasure is a biochemical reaction to sensory stimulation. That's a quick recap of what I talked about. But the real question here that I wanted to move on to is, what can we do about it? And now this, take way too much time than what I have today, but there are 4 elements. You might say I'm giving an outline for somebody to follow up and do a class series on this. And there are 4 elements to healing any health problem, really. You could apply this, and particularly the greatest of all health problems, which is ignorance, soul ignorance. But these 4 things are self-awareness. Awareness precedes control. It's the old saying in yoga, to be on the alert, in other words, for addictive behavior. Look at ourselves. Self-honesty, truthfulness with ourselves. Don't shove things under the rug or deny. Part of addictive people that are addictive, it's denial. Oh, I have a friend who's terribly addicted to. He's got to see all the news every morning and talk about politics. I mean, it's just an addictive behavior. And I says, why do you do that? He says, well, I've got to keep up on the news. I've got to do this, and I'm not addicted to it. It's that truthfulness with ourselves. And I'm not saying don't watch the news. I'm just saying don't be addicted to things. Truthfulness with ourselves to overcome. Don't deny or sweep things under the rug. Commit in a broader sense to telling the truth in all aspects of our life. It's one of the yamas, of course, to be truthful. And this is why it's a big part of many recovery efforts from people who are seriously addicted, to be a truth teller. Don't deny. And third, a sincere desire to change. You can have all this, but nothing, you can be aware, you can be honest with yourself, but if you have no desire to change, it's not going to happen. And finally, a willingness to take action. Those are the 4 primary things to approach any sort of health problem. We have to, if we want to overcome it, particularly here in this case of addiction. And I might have added a 5th one. It would be an inclusion of a willingness to seek help. And as a devotee, I think this really is part of it, because as a devotee, the first and greatest seeking of help is to ask for help from God, seek help from God and Guru, to want help, to do what's necessary to draw that help and to seek that help. I would include that, but also, I mentioned prayer and so on, but also help in a professional. Sometimes you need friends, you need help from good advice, people that know better, getting to that professional help you need. But quickly, getting down to some of the specifics, I think you might want to consider these things. And 1, a pleasure fast. Addictive behavior of any sort causes the body to stop the production of these biochemicals of dopamine, which helps us feel good. Now, we're devotees, and we don't like to think so much of the cold science of these, but be aware that cold science exists whether you like it or not. Addictive behavior causes the body to stop the production of those chemicals that keeps us in a state of balance. And that makes us feel good because we're using outward stimulation to create it. It depresses that. And because we go out of balance, we begin to feel these symptoms. And these symptoms are a warning. They're a good thing in that sense, is that dopamine deficit state is telling us something. But when we abstain from addictive behavior, the body naturally becomes to come back into balance. And if we can long enough, we can train the body to return to that state of balance, and the body begins to recover, to make what it says, to make its own endogenous, natural to the body dopamine and chemicals, and stop we stop something such as pleasure, stopping something such as pleasure addictive behavior helps us become aware, but through the symptoms that we're addicted to it, and it allows us, if we want to do something about it. And severe addiction often, of course, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I'm talking about the normal run-of-the-mill. But severe addiction, you have to do this in a measured fashion. But you could even apply that principle to day-to-day addictions as well. What we want to do is to find ways to bring the body back into balance so that we can begin then to, make those changes that are necessary without being in that deficit state. The big one, of course, environment is stronger than willpower. And this has two elements to it. And I can't go into these very much because the time's the restrictions. But the things we should do, in other words, positive environment and avoidance of the negative environment. And I think we know intuitively what this means. Positive substitutes, positive alternatives, and looking forward, binding ourselves, setting up our environment to support our ideals. That's the motto of a devotee, is to arrange your environment that helps you live to your highest ideals. But there is one, that's an element, environment, but there's one element I want to give a little focus to, and then invite positive challenge into your life. This is actually very good. By this I mean, make a conscious effort to do something that is opposite in the direction of your desire. And it's common for most people, the natural tendency of the human species is to seek comfort, to seek ease. We think that's best for us. If I do the easy thing, the comfortable thing, that must be the healthy thing to do. That's not true. It's not so. It's been shown by practical experience, many studies, and if you think about it more deeply, mild doses, and I want to say it this way, mild doses of healthy discomfort, mild doses of challenge, mild doses of effort, even mild doses of pain in the small doses at a time, they can help us to regulate ourselves. They stimulated us. Here's an example. Physical exercise. Most people don't want to do physical. They want to take the easy way in life. But physical exercise is a conscious effort to do something that's uncomfortable, to go out and do that run or that long walk. And they can be pleasurable in themselves, but basically we're stressing the body, we're stressing the willpower. These have purely physical benefits, but they have psychological benefits by merely engaging the will in something that takes effort. Will, perhaps, maybe even discomfort. It's been shown that exposing an organism to mild pain even, or to discomfort, has been shown to make it more healthy. Isn't it so? You do something that's really you got to go, oh, it's struggling, but then hey, I feel really good afterwards. The body, the chemicals in the body you're resetting them into balance. And you could say there's a whole school of thought around this of medical treatments called effortful engagement, and engaging ourselves into things that take effort. And meditation is in this category. People don't normally want to meditate. At first, eventually you do want to meditate because you realize this, but meditation takes the will. It takes the effort to concentrate. You can't just slide into samadhi. You got to put effort into it to go deep. So this is an effort. It's an effortful engagement. Doing those energization exercises, just the effort to overcome the no-sane tendency in doing anything. I don't want to do that. It rebalances the chemical composition of the body and brain chemical balance. It counters that I don't want to habit, or that just engaging in that act of will. We get our will engaged and it draws support from the universe, but we have to get it going. We get it going. Yes, yes, yes. Then the energy begins to come back. But this subtle things are taking place in the body, subtle things are taking place in the brain. Effort, focus, regularity. Stimulating mild discomfort that induces the brain to stimulate dopamine production, serotonin production, all of these things. It brings the brain back into balance. And in a broad sense, you could even include serviceful activity. I'm going to consciously do something that's useful to effort. I don't really want to put out the effort, but I'm going to do it. Now, we do realize the spiritual benefits that come from this, but the body and brain itself. I say focus. When I say that, it means doing something with intention, engaging of the will in order to strengthen it. This is something called practicing, you might say, modern asceticism, or asceticism in the modern world, is to figure out ways to navigate the modern world of abundance, this modern world of pleasure, this modern world of easy access to whatever I want. And I'm speaking of the modern technological world. There are places where this isn't so, but I'm saying technological societies worldwide insulate ourselves from that pleasure impulse at ease by thinking, attention, being conscious. And finally, one more positive solution. I've mentioned bringing God and Guru into this. Finally, one more positive, the role of human relationships in the battle of addiction, positive engagement in social relationships. Oftentimes people become addicted to things and they hide it, they put it on they begin to isolate themselves in some way. They begin to close themselves off. Positive social relationships. You don't think of it in terms of helping you in this way, but it actually is a big help. We don't isolate ourselves, and just the fact of having positive social relationships and the effort it takes to sustain and build those substitute for some of the pulls of those addictive behaviors. I'll leave it at that. And because obviously you can see the whole class series, a whole course could be made out of this, but keep a few of these in mind as we go forward in healing body, mind, and soul. Those first four principles I mentioned. God bless all of you. And let's conclude this element of our healing Sangha by projecting, closing our eyes, putting our attention at the heart, drawing that energy up to the brain, up to the point between the eyebrows, and sending our blessings, inviting God's presence into our lives. Heal us of ignorance, O Guru. Heal us from anything that separates us from Thee, and may we have the strength and courage to share that with all souls everywhere. Let's rub our hands together and let us send these blessings out into the world, asking for our healing body, mind, and souls with ourselves, and be an instrument of that to all souls everywhere. Oh.